I recently stumbled upon a headline that was catnip to me. Beckanip, let's call it. J.D. Vance says UFOs are actually demons. Yeah, okay, sure, of course. Of course J.D. Vance would say that. Why wouldn't J.D. Vance say that? And of course J.D. Vance said that to Benny Johnson, the embarrassing far-right loser who's most famous for being a plagiarist. And of course he just randomly said that in a conversation that did not involve religion in any way. Here, have a look.
You're going to release all the UFO files?
We're working on it. It's funny. When I came in, I was obsessed with the UFO files. And then you start getting really busy worrying about the economy and national security and things like that. But I've still got 3 more years as vice president. I will get to the bottom of the UFO files.
Okay. Have you peeked? Have you done a peek?
Have I what?
Have you done a peek? Have you
So I actually haven't. I have
full
not.
Independence Day.
I have not been able to spend enough time on this to really understand it. Yeah. But I am going to. Trust me, I'm obsessed with this. I've already had a couple of times where I'm like, all right, we're going to Area 51. We're going out to New Mexico. We're going to sort of get to the bottom of this. And then the timing of the trip just didn't work out. But trust me, anybody who's curious about this, I'm more curious than anybody. And I've got 3 years of the very, very tippy top of the classification. I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
Okay, so you haven't been to Area 51 yet?
Not yet.
Some people say they keep the UFOs in Ohio.
Hangar 18, Hangar 18, right?
I've
heard that as well, but I don't know. I haven't looked into it yet.
Okay, all right. Well, we're waiting for it. We saw aliens.gov. We saw aliens.gov.
I don't think they're aliens. I think they're demons anyway, but that's a longer discussion.
Well, I can't let you go without a follow-up on that, because Barack Obama is on this podcast and he goes, "Yeah, aliens are real, but here's where they're not." And
I did not.
And so Obama says, yes, aliens. He gets asked point blank, "Are aliens real?" He says, "Oh yeah," and then he goes, "But they're not at Area 51." And
where are they?
Well, that's what he says. Right. That's a great question. Trump had to go save him, and he said he's going to declassify. Okay. So you think they're demons?
Well, look, I think that celestial beings who fly around, who do weird things to people, I think that the desire to describe everything celestial, everything as otherworldly, to describe it as aliens. I mean, every great world religion, including Christianity, the one that I believe in, has understood that there are weird things out there, and there are things that are very difficult to explain. And I naturally go, when I hear about sort of extra natural phenomenon, that's where I go to, is the Christian understanding that, there's a lot of good out there, but there's also some evil out there. And I think that one of the devil's great tricks is to convince people he never existed.
Now, this is not actually as much of a non sequitur as many people may understandably think. For a start, those who study the history of superstitions and myths and weird beliefs have made clear how humans spent millennia blaming gods and angels and demons for scary phenomena that they could not otherwise explain. Eclipses and floods and comets and diseases. As we learn more about ourselves and our planet and our solar system and our universe, some of the remaining scary mysteries started to be attributed not to demons, but by creatures from outer space, an idea that really took off in the 1950s, thanks in part to an influx of movies and comics and television shows. Cases of sleep paralysis that were previously attributed to succubi now became incidences of alien abduction. You really hardly ever hear about succubi anymore, and I think that's a shame. We don't just lose our silly beliefs as science and technology progress. We incorporate science and technology into our silly beliefs. So why is J.D. Vance now seeming to marry the two ideas, and in a way that kind of regresses back away from a technological explanation towards a religious explanation? Well, I can't say for sure, because happily, I do not live in his head. Maybe he truly fervently believes what he's saying, and he just happened to come up with this idea all on his own. But knowing what I know about J.D. Vance, I have another hypothesis. First, let me lay out the bases. For a start, J.D. Vance has a very well-known history of being a snivelly little lying piece of shit who will say or do anything to get ahead. Most famously, perhaps, he once called Donald Trump America's Hitler in a derogatory way, and not long after, he was happily joining America's Hitler on the campaign trail as a candidate for vice president. He also wrote a book years prior to that and marketed it by pretending to be a concerned liberal. He also married a non-white immigrant and later announced that non-white immigrants were terrible people who eat cats and dogs. On and on and on. He believes in nothing, it seems. The other basis for my hypothesis is how J.D. Vance managed to gain all of his political power despite being an obvious weasel with zero charisma. Because Peter Thiel paid for him to get that power. Every win J.D. Vance has ever won was really thanks to Peter Thiel and his billions of dollars. Thiel hired Vance to his venture capital firm. Then he gave him the funding to co-found his own venture capital firm, which then invested in Rumble back when J.D. Vance was still the hillbilly elegy guy. Then Thiel funded his successful Senate campaign, and then he sat down with both Vance and Trump to smooth over all of that Hitler stuff and pave the way for Vance to become VP. Peter Thiel owns J.D. Vance. That's also probably why in 2019, J.D. Vance officially converted to Catholicism, which is Peter Thiel's religion of choice. It's also probably why Vance decided that he really loves the philosophy of René Girard, a Catholic scholar who was so influential that he spawned a group of fans known as Girardians, which I'm pretty sure is the same as a weight loss medication now. Anyway, the most famous Girardian on the planet is Peter Thiel. Okay, so what does all that have to do with angels and demons and aliens? Well, Girardians, like Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance, believe in something called mimetic rivalry, which put simply is the idea that we all tend to imitate one another's desires, in those we love and in those we hate. And that eventually leads to violence. In order to find relief from mimetic rivalry, we scapegoat. We all agree to turn our aggression on a single target. When the entire world bands together against one single scapegoat, we find a moment of peace before the Antichrist ushers in the end times. I will once again point to my own history of growing up in a Baptist church where I was taught end times theology. I was explicitly told that the Antichrist would probably be the guy who was running the United Nations. This was extremely confusing for me as a child because in school I learned that the UN was a good thing, and I couldn't really square how it would end up being a tool of the Antichrist. These days, I'm older, wiser, and I've seen way crazier belief systems, so yeah, I kind of get it. Jesus was the first big scapegoat that the world turned against, so the world uniting against one victim means the world is the problem and the victim is not. But as I've mentioned when discussing Christian Zionism in the past, I was taught that the Antichrist's arrival was not only inevitable, but also a good thing. We Christians who had already welcomed Christ into our hearts would be brought to heaven, while all of the Jews and Muslims and atheists and whatnot would have to deal with the worst of the end times. But some people, like Peter Thiel, have clung on to a concept that pops up briefly in the Bible, the catechon, or that which withholds, a figure who can delay the end times. Some people, like Peter Thiel, are desperate to identify and lift up the catechon. If you have some time, I highly recommend you read this incredible article from Laura Bullard, published by Wired last September. In it, she describes the foundation of Thiel's belief system and why he became so obsessed with the Antichrist that he has been on a lecture tour about that topic for like 2 years and is currently holding court in the Pope's own backyard, much to the chagrin of the mainstream Catholic Church. Essentially, Thiel became obsessed with both René Girard and Carl Schmitt, an early 20th century political theorist who agreed that a united world would usher in the apocalypse, and so he identified a catechon who he was sure would keep the world fractured and thus safe from the apocalypse. That person is Adolf Hitler. Schmidt happily joined up with the Nazis, excited to be part of Operation Stop the Antichrist, only to watch as the entire world literally banded together to defeat the Third Reich, forming the United Nations, which is now what so many Christians believe is the vehicle of the Antichrist. It's actually impressive to be as wrong as Schmidt was. Despite that, Thiel loves the guy and seems to think that the main thing Schmidt got wrong was announcing that he had found the guy to stop the Antichrist. Girard's mimetic rivalry suggests that when we fight our opposite, we become more like them. And that is why Schmidt and Hitler failed. So Thiel's decided to take a different tack. He has spent his life investing his billions of dollars into technologies that he believes will stave off the end times. At a Girardian seminar Thiel hosted at Stanford in the summer of 2004, Thiel delivered a paper in which he lauds and quotes Schmidt and says that Schmidt would surely choose to have responded to 9/11 by launching a holy war against Islam. But nuclear weapons are a thing, so Thiel suggests that a better path forward is working around democratic institutions because America's constitutional machinery prevents a direct path forward. Instead, Thiel thinks the answer is a global surveillance network that operates outside the checks and balances of representative democracy as described in high school textbooks. He had just launched Palantir the year prior, and he brought on the CIA as his first client shortly after that conference. So, why do I think J.D. Vance is suddenly and seemingly randomly combining the ideas of high-tech aliens with medieval demons? For a start, I think it's to redirect the conversation in a way that his owner, Peter Thiel, is sure to notice and appreciate on a break between his lectures on the Antichrist in Rome. And according to some very annoyed Girardians mentioned in the Wired article, it may also have something to do with the fact that J.D. Vance has no real understanding of Girard's ideas and is using scapegoating the complete wrong way. But Ballard wisely points out, does he misunderstand it, or does he correctly guess that scapegoating a population of immigrants as pet eaters might be able to coalesce a base of voters into harmony long enough to get him elected? Now, I'm not going to give J.D. Vance any credit for running a game of 5D chess here. This is pretty standard politics in the 21st century, unfortunately. But I do think that his off-putting, clumsy, and awkward comment about demons and aliens isn't quite as random as it seems. I think he's genuinely attempting to synchronize these concepts in a way that he hopes will get him rewarded, both from his wealthy, Antichrist-obsessed owner and from his conspiracy-brained base of voters in preparation for his future run as president. Here's hoping the end times happen before he's ever successful at that. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.